The war in Iran, which has cost the lives of 13 service members and currently has the United States military desperately searching for a missing service member in Iran, has not stopped Pete Hegseth and his purge at the Pentagon. Hegseth has fired Army Chief of Staff Randy George, who was the Army's top uniformed officer, along with 2 other generals. The Pentagon confirmed the firing, saying that George would be retiring from his position immediately. According to the New York Times, George's senior Army officers reacted with anger and frustration to the news of General George's dismissal, characterizing it as the latest blow to a service that already feels under siege by Hegseth. The firing of George is the latest in a wave of meddling that Hegseth has involved himself in at the Pentagon. NBC News reports that Hegseth has interfered with the promotion of more than a dozen senior military officers, which include Hegseth personally blocking the promotions of 4 officers set to become one-star generals. 2 of them were black and 2 of whom were women. According to the New York Times, in the weeks ahead of the defense secretary blocking their promotion, Hegseth has been pressing Secretary of the Army Dan Driscoll and General George for months to remove the officers from the promotion list. But Mr. Driscoll and General George refused, citing the officers' long records of exemplary service. Joining me at the table, Paul Rieckhoff. He is the host of the Independent Americans podcast and the founder and CEO of Independent Veterans of America. Also with us, political analyst Molly Jong-Fast. She's the host of Fast Politics and a New York Times contributing opinion writer. The crazy thing about this, Molly, is that General George was confirmed, I believe, 96-1 in the Senate confirmation hearing when he was promoted to that position. And it seems like this is the new normal for Pete Hegseth, right? That irrespective of the confirmation process, irrespective of the endorsement that an officer has from his officers and the rank and file soldiers, Pete Hegseth is willing to politicize somebody who stands up to him or disagrees with him on something.
Yeah, you know, it's like they're doing all the stuff they accuse the left of doing, right? They were like, it's a woke army, it's politicized. And then here you have someone who is a political actor, really, who's been on television, Hegseth, who is now firing someone who's, a 96 senators voting for someone shows that they are not a political animal, that they are, in fact, a nonpartisan actor in the military. And again, like when you look at that reporting about the members, the generals who were up for promotions, right? They were taken from, taken out of promotion for, and you have the other people who are like nonpartisan military actors saying, there's no reason to remove them. So they are actually doing the very thing that they have accused the woke left of doing.
Yeah, they're always in projection. Paul, what do you think this sends? What type of message? We're in the middle of a war. This is when you're expecting, the entire chain of command to be unified, to at least be on the same page, even if there is, through the normal process, disagreements about tactics and strategy. But in the middle of a war, what message does this send that you are firing somebody like General George?
The message it sends is that loyalty is prized over integrity. And this has always been Hegseth. Hegseth has demanded loyalty. He's always been what I call the acting secretary of culture war, because he's always been focused on the culture war and battling the woke and battling DEI and battling the liberals, much more so than battling Putin or even battling our enemies in the Middle East. He's always wanted to cleanse the Pentagon of anyone who opposed him or wasn't in lockstep with the administration. Here's the real problem. Now he's in an unpopular war. He's in a forever war that a lot of people in the Pentagon don't like either. And if they speak out critically about that, you're going to see, I think, a new wave of purges and firings that are happening. There's also an internal political conflict happening between Hegseth and Army Secretary Dan Driscoll. That's now starting to trickle out. He can't fire Driscoll, but he can fire the generals around him. Only the president can get rid of Driscoll. And there's concerns that Driscoll might overshadow Hegseth, that he could even replace Hegseth. So there's some internal conflict happening. And the calls are coming from inside the House. There are a lot of people who don't respect Hegseth. He's got very little support from the rank and file civilians across the Army, and that popularity continues to plummet. And as the war continues to go sideways, and if not south, he's going to be on the hook for a lot of it. He's going to demand loyalty. And I hope that we hear from these generals finally who've been fired. They often don't speak out. They don't want to cross that political Rubicon. Now is the time for us to hear from them because our democracy requires it.
You called him the acting secretary of culture wars. And I think that's so important because I guess you definitely do not want any cultural wars happening in our military. You don't want morale to be eroded as a result of these politicized culture wars that somebody like Pete Hegseth is leaning into. And yet that is exactly what he's doing. Going forward, not just in the next week or two, what is the long-term damage to our military, to our national security, because of the culture wars that Pete Hegseth has injected into the military?
It narrows it. It makes it look more like Trump's army. It makes it look more like the MAGA army. I mean, another thing that Hegseth did here is he fired the head of the chaplain corps, because he wants to enhance the chaplain corps. He wants more religion. He wants more of his brand of religion. He invokes Jesus almost every time, where, only 80% or so of the force is Christian. To everyone else, he's not talking to you. So if you're not Christian, if you don't believe in Jesus, you probably don't feel as welcome in this military right now as you might have under a previous administration. Also, yesterday, he also took time to decide he was going to allow open carry firearms on military bases. In the middle of all this, after his president gave a terribly a failure of a speech, he posted a video how he's going to allow open carries on military bases. He's focused on that instead of focusing on our enemies, which is a continued focus on the culture war. And I would argue right now, it seems like Pete Hegseth might be interested in running for president, because he's much more interested in these political issues, these culture war issues, than he is in fighting our wars overseas.